Start, Caro, before we get to Melbourne, with some breaking news around the Hawthorn Football Club and an insight further into the racism saga.
Yeah, well, Hawthorn, we can report tonight, Craig, have offered a combined settlement of $300,000 to 6 individuals who have been appearing at the Human Rights Commission. Those talks, of course, broke down or ended last week with no resolution. So, Craig, Cyril Rioli, his partner Shannon Sam Rioli, Jermaine Miller-Lewis and his partner Montana Miller-Lewis, Carl Peterson and the club's former Indigenous Welfare Officer, Leon Egan, have each been offered $50,000, so a combined $300,000 as part of a settlement that was rejected by all 6 last week. We reported last week, and we know that all parties were saying it wasn't about money, it was about an apology and acknowledgement that racism took place at the club involving all of them. Hawthorn have refused to do that. Acknowledgements were made by Alistair Clarkson in a lengthy and hefty mediation day on day 2 with all the families and their lawyers, where he talked about a failed or a problematic methodology, but certainly not racism. But we now know that Hawthorn, on top of that, have offered this settlement. It has been rejected.
So the deal's been rejected, and of course Lee Matthews has a different view. We'll get his views
more
against
on
you
Hawthorn and the
a little bit later on.
AFL coaches
just very
and
quickly,
what's going on later in the show.
It's been knocked back, so very quickly before we move on, it feels a small amount of money or an in-between amount of money. I think you're either saying you're innocent and there's no money, or if you're conceding, you're conceding of a greater magnitude than $50,000 a person.
I was surprised. We know their legal bill, Hawthorn, is now close to $1 million. We know at their AGM recently they'd said they'd set aside $1.5 million on legal fees and resolutions. I think it's going to cost them more than that. Lee Matthews' anger and frustration on 3AW on Saturday reflected his deep concern for his coach and friend Chris Fagan and what he's been going through.
The complaint for Chris Fagan is he nodded his head once in a meeting. That's the complaint. And the reputational damage has been, it is shambolic and it's disgusting.
I would venture that Lee's upset on behalf of Alistair Clarkson also, and he's not the only one. The 2 senior AFL coaches have been to the brink on more than one occasion, the emotional brink this season, and it's not over yet. They and Jason Burt have been cleared by the AFL of any wrongdoing, and they've denied the allegations against them. And yet, let's face it, this process has been flawed from the start. The AFL, as I said, is deeply worried about Fagan and Clarkson and their well-being. For mine, personally, I think Hawthorn was ill-equipped to deal with the challenges posed and suffered by some First Nations families who came to the club. Nor did Hawthorn at times prioritise those challenges. But for 3 individuals to shoulder the burden on behalf of an entire club is just wrong.
A question arising from that from me, Caro. Lee Matthews challenged you about your column on Saturday, and you had a difference of view on your column versus his view.
He challenged...
No, he did. That's fair. My direct question, though, is his reference to the Chris Fagan nod as being all he's accused of. This was the first time I had heard that. Do you accept that to be true?
Well, Chris Fagan has denied that he was in a meeting where he is alleged to have nodded at something that the coach
But is that
said.
the only thing he's accused of, as Lee says in this process?
I haven't seen everything that Chris Fagan's been accused of, but I think, yes, it is one meeting where something that Alistair Clarkson has denied even saying. I think you're right. And I also think that Alistair Clarkson did... And Lee kept saying, what are you saying? You're putting words in his mouth. He made admissions of regret at things that happened at the club and regret that those players didn't have the careers they had. And he spoke of a methodology, but not racism.
But Lee argues
he
that
certainly never apologised.
In conciliation, you do concede some ground in the means of moving forward, and that Lee felt you misrepresented Alistair's role in that as well. I
think we were actually agreeing with the same thing. I don't think he understood what I was saying. I certainly think that Alistair shouldered the burden on behalf of everyone when he spent that gruelling day at the Human Rights Commission.